Western leaders are belatedly modifying their tone. And I say modifying because they haven't radically transformed what they're saying to Israel, but they've changed their tone. Here's the Foreign Secretary, or here's UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron speaking about the threat of an imminent ground invasion in Rafah.
We are very concerned about what is happening in Rafah, because let's be clear, the people there, many of them have moved 4, 5, 6 times before getting there. And it really, we think, is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't go south into Egypt. They can't go north and back to their homes because many have been destroyed. So we are very concerned about the situation, and we want Israel to stop and think very seriously before it takes any further action. But above all, what we want is an immediate pause in the fighting. And we want that pause to lead to a ceasefire, a sustainable ceasefire, without a return to further fighting. That's what should happen now. We need to get those hostages out, including the British nationals. We need to get the aid in. The best way to do that is stop the fighting now and turn that into a permanent, sustainable ceasefire.
2 problems with that. One, it's 3 months too late. Okay. This idea, it was fine to bomb every other city in Gaza until it was completely destroyed and would take a decade to rebuild, killing 30-odd thousand people. But now actually they've crossed some sort of arbitrary red line, which means that now suddenly we have a problem with it. The second big problem, right? They're just words. There are some very concrete things the United Kingdom could do to pressure Israel, right? We could cut off aid. We could apply sanctions. We do that to Russia. There's no reason why we can't apply sanctions to a rogue state that's killing thousands of civilians. The Israelis have killed, we think, twice as many civilians in Gaza over the past 3 months as Russia has killed in Ukraine over the past 2 years. So the idea, we can't possibly put Israel in the same category as Russia, is ridiculous if you're looking at the damage of the wars they're fighting. I mean, also if you're looking at the extent to which they've broken international law. Russia, that was a war of aggression. We've always been very clear that was a war of aggression. That's illegal. Israel have been undergoing or overseeing what everyone acknowledges is an illegal occupation of Palestine, of the West Bank and Gaza, for 56 years. Right? So this is a rogue state, but we don't treat it like one. Every now and again, we talk about it like maybe it is one. But even that, those words, they should stop and they should think. Right? This is not a toddler. This is a nuclear-armed state, which is carrying out a genocidal war. It's too little, too late. Talking of too little, too late, Labour leader Keir Starmer, he hasn't commented at all on the latest assault on Rafah. But yesterday he said this, there are over 1.4 million displaced Palestinians in Rafah, and it is the gateway to aid for Gaza. An Israeli offensive there would be catastrophic. The fighting must stop now. We need a sustainable ceasefire. Even now, right? That phrasing I just find, so the fighting must stop now. We need a sustainable ceasefire, right? Now we need a sustainable ceasefire. We need an immediate ceasefire. Would be much stronger for me. We need a sustainable ceasefire. What does that mean? I mean, Labour have been arguing for a very long time. We don't want an immediate ceasefire. We only want a ceasefire when it's sustainable. And what does that mean? It's so ambiguous that you're basically giving, Netanyahu a blank check. The fighting must stop now. What about the bombardment of Rafah? Might stop now. This idea, there's just these 2 sides. If only they'd stop fighting. There are 1.5 million people who've been pushed into a small city with absolutely nowhere to go, who are being bombed from the air, right? It's not a case of can they stop fighting. It's can this nuclear-powered nation stop bombing innocent civilians who have nowhere to go, right? It's still just very, very weak. In contrast to UK politicians, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, had stronger words for Israel. He said this: a potential full-fledged military incursion into Rafah, where some 1.5 million Palestinians are packed against the Egyptian border with nowhere further to flee, is terrifying, given the prospect that an extremely high number of civilians, again mostly children and women, will likely be killed and injured. Israel must comply with the legally binding orders issued by the International Court of Justice and with the full span of international humanitarian law. Those who defy international law have been put on notice. Accountability must follow. So in terms of accountability, the International Criminal Court play a key role. The chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has issued a warning to Israel saying this: my office has an ongoing and active investigation into the situation in the state of Palestine. This is being taken forward as a matter of the utmost urgency with a view to bringing to justice those responsible for Rome Statute crimes. All wars have rules, and the laws applicable to armed conflict cannot be interpreted so as to render them hollow or devoid of meaning. This has been my consistent message, including from Ramallah last year. Since that time, I have not seen any discernible change in conduct by Israel. We can also go to the EU's foreign representative, Joseph Borrell, and this is his view on Israel's approach to Rafah.
Many people around the world, even the US, who is the strongest supporter of Israel, consider it by the President Biden himself that this action is disproportionate, that the toll of people being killed, civilians being killed, is unbearable, and warning Israel not to continue this way. But my question is, apart from words, what else do you think it has to be done? If you believe that the toll of death is too high, do you have any possibility to make it lower?
What's your answer to that, High Representative? What can the European Union do beyond the words? Do you have a proposal for what the European Union should do beyond the words?
Well, the European Union is not providing arms to Israel. Others do.
Borrell's suggestion that people should take more action to stop states selling arms to Israel is very interesting. I think it's clear that all Western governments have been incredibly slow on this, and they still are incredibly slow on this, although courts are beginning to intervene. A coalition of human rights groups in the Netherlands has had a victory in the courts. A Dutch court has ordered the Netherlands to halt the export of F-35 jet parts to Israel after the groups brought a case against the government in the Netherlands. It's illegal to sell arms to powers that might use them for humanitarian abuses. I think this is the case in most Western states, but they find a way to essentially ignore that reality, unless it's a state who's fallen out of favor with the West. These things don't tend to be particularly governed by moral rules, but rather strategic or opportunistic ones. The Dutch government had argued that Israel was complying with international law. You'd be a pretty goddamn shit judge if you believe that argument. The Dutch court said this: it is undeniable there is a clear risk the exported F-35 parts are used in serious violations of international humanitarian law. Israel does not take sufficient account of the consequences for the civilian population when conducting its attacks. Now, the Dutch government has 7 days to comply or appeal to the Supreme Court. So that could be significant. I mean, it wouldn't be significant in the sense that if the Netherlands no longer supplies arms to Israel, it would have to significantly change its actions. But if that sets a precedent and other European countries follow, that could be significant. It would obviously be more significant if the United States got involved. Speaking of the United States, as this deadly assault was going on in Rafah, most Americans were watching the Super Bowl. During that game, or after that game, in fact, Joe Biden posted this on Twitter, just like we drew it up, alongside a picture of Biden with laser eyes. Now, this would, in another circumstance, potentially have been an entertaining tweet. He's mocking a right-wing conspiracy theory about Taylor Swift and American football player Travis Kelce. So the right-wing conspiracy is that their relationship was fabricated in order to damage Trump, and that Kelsey's team were helped to win the Super Bowl. Fine to make a joke about that. But to post that while a genocidal action is taking place with your full-throated support, that changes things, right? That changes things. Joe Biden has said today, apparently he said that Netanyahu was an asshole. Right, so he's getting really tough on Netanyahu now, briefing that in private he called him an asshole. Right? How about ending your unconditional support for military aid to that nation? Right? The Americans can have consequences when it comes to what Israel do. They could pick up the phone today and stop this bombardment of Rafah. Instead, Joe Biden likes to pretend to, what could I possibly do? Oh, by the way, I called him an asshole. How big and strong am I? It's completely pathetic. Going back to the Super Bowl, this was an occasion, obviously, millions and millions of Americans watching, and there was some Israeli propaganda for them all to view. Several ads paid for by the Israeli government aired on channels that were streaming the game.
To all the dads, the funny ones, the silly ones, the strong ones, the adventurous ones. To all the dads held in captivity by Hamas for over 120 days, we vow to bring you home.
We vow to bring them home by carrying out our genocidal war, which doesn't actually save hostages apart from these two, right? You probably killed a lot more hostages than they've saved by this military campaign. Helena, I want your comments on, much of what we talked about, the Super Bowl ads, but then also this very belated change of tune from Western politicians. They're now saying, oh, no, it would be terrible to bomb people who don't have anywhere to go. Like, why has that principle suddenly come into play when they've been completely ignoring that over the past 3 months? What do you think is going on here?
I mean, I think it seems every time I come on this show, I have to start off my segment with, once again, what the left have been saying forever has been proven to be correct. In the run-up to the conflict, we said if there's not diplomatic relations established in the area, conflict will escalate, and it has done. We said that if we allow there to be a military incursion into Gaza, we'll see huge amounts of death and destruction, and we have done. We said that if we allow them to be able to engage in a forced transfer of the population from the north to the south, they would not stop there, and we were proven correct. And now we're at the point where their backs are against the wall in Rafah. The ethnic cleansing is right at the fever pitch that it could get to. We said that it would happen, and it has done. Did anybody pay attention to us? No. And it's just infuriating to be at this point where we get mealy-mouthed comments on the potential for huge amounts of human casualty with this Rafah invasion from people like our government and our opposition. It's pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic. I'm so furious at the level to which our politicians have just allowed this to happen with rhetoric, with diplomatic support, with the arms that we sell them, and any amount of pushback against this, whilst Israel are taken to the ICJ over claims of committing genocide. And now the game is up, and huge amounts, the whole of northern Gaza is just turned into a wasteland at this point. Was it 60% of buildings in the Gaza Strip are now destroyed or damaged? And now they take pipe up. Now we've gone too far. Now things have gotten to the point where we have to actually put out comments, actually rejecting an action that's being taken by Israel, rather than just they can do what they want as long as they defend themselves within international law, whilst international laws are violated left, right, and centre, and no specific comments are made about their actions. No comments about these things at all. As for Joe Biden, right? Oh yeah, he calls him an asshole. Right? Are you correct to point out one phone call could potentially have ended this conflict if Biden just said enough's enough, we have to stop? This is how the conflict in Lebanon finished in the 80s when Menachem Begin was phoned up by Ronald Reagan, of all people, neocon extraordinaire, and told him that enough was enough in Lebanon. But unfortunately, Biden is just a spineless little wretch. I'd hate to be rude about him, but that's literally what you get when you have a shuffling cadaver in the White House, again, essentially our bulwark against what could be potentially happening in the Middle East. We're both happening now and in a future Trump presidency. And he doesn't even have the spine to stand up to Netanyahu in telling him not to do this genocidal campaign. And on top of that, will bypass Congress to send billions of dollars in aid and weapons to Israel. It's shameless. It's completely indefensible. And it's too late. It's too late for these people to turn back the clocks of the last 4 months of impunity that they've allowed Israel to engage in their genocidal campaign. I hate to be emotional. I want to be objective and to be matter of fact, but I just cannot get rid of my emotions because it's just so obscene that this is allowed to get this far at this point.
It would be, well, forgivable is the wrong word, but I would at least take it seriously, right? If you had a change of tune from these Western politicians and they say, okay, it's gone too far. We are going to take serious action now to stop it. As you say, we pick up a phone, call an Israeli president, say, if you don't stop this, we're going to withdraw your aid and we're going to stop vetoing the Security Council resolutions for you to stop, right? It would be so easy for the Americans to stop them. If they did that now, right, yeah, I still wouldn't forgive them for the last 3 months, but I would at least take it seriously. It would be a big deal. But the United States shifting from unconditional support for Israel while speaking highly of them in public to unconditional support of Israel while speaking about them in public in a way which is a bit mean, right? That is not a radical shift. And it's not a shift which is going to save any lives.